Good evening, protest followers. We're speaking with a good friend of mine, one Stuart Bonds, who's on the other side of this screen, and we were talking about tomorrow's upcoming Truckies strike. He's from the Hunter Valley. He's a coal miner, and he was an independent candidate for Parliament who was only 800 votes shy of winning. Don't get to speak to too many independent candidates, especially not ones that come that close to winning. So, Stuart, thank you for making the time to speak with me and to share with everyone what we think is going to happen tomorrow.
It was only a whisker, wasn't it? But it seems like a lifetime ago now. Now in coronavirus years, where it's almost like time standing still. It's been a crazy few years, and we're set for another federal election coming up. And I think that these lockdowns are going to be straight on the cards. They'll be the top issue. I think ScoMo wants this stuff to end as quick as possible so that he can mop everything up and we can move forward. But these premiers, you and me, we're only 250 kilometres away, but we might as well be in other countries at the moment. It's just nuts.
I need to apply for special permission to move to your area, even though we're not that far apart. And that needs to go through two different approvals. I need to go to the police and get their okay as well, so they know that the movement is occurring. The regulations for me to move, forget interstate, just out of the Sydney Basin is difficult. So yeah, it's absolutely a number one issue that we're facing politically. It's divisive, but the two majors are moving in lockstep, are pretty much the only ones that aren't. But we'll come back to the political side of this, because reason why is that we were talking about something happening tomorrow, and I said, mate, we got to share this with everyone. What do you think is going to happen tomorrow?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's been a lot of talk in the background worlds about this Truckie strike. And now, not to be confused with the toll Truckie strike that went on Friday. Now, the media covered that strike, right? And I would assume that they did that to cover up for what is about to happen all over New South Wales, which is that mainly, from what I can gather, the independent truck drivers who are shipping freight from New South Wales into Queensland and South Australia and Victoria, is that they are going to be forced to get a vaccination to do their job. And this looks like it was the straw that broke the camel's back. And these guys are planning on blocking all major routes in and out of the state, right? Not just in and out of the state, but in and out of Sydney as well. Right? And you got to remember,
Now, there already was a protest this morning, in fact, just here on the border with Queensland, where a couple of truckies decided to block the main motorway there. Is this a sign of what's to come?
Well, maybe there was a practice run. Maybe they got the dates wrong. But I heard that those truck drivers only moved because they heard that there were horses on the road that couldn't get through. Now, I don't know how true that is. You don't want to go unloading horses in the middle of the highway, because if they get into an environment they haven't seen before, they just go ballistic. So good on them for moving on, I guess, under those circumstances. But tomorrow, I think, might be D-Day. And what I was discussing with you, you were saying, there might be a few dozen, disgruntled truck drivers. You know what traffic is like on the Pacific Highway if there is one car accident, two vehicle car accident, right? That is it. The traffic is pulled up for 10, 12, 15 kilometres, depending on the time of day that it is. Now, that's not a total blockage, both lanes, both directions. That's a single vehicle car crash in the lane when they pull it off to the side and they're just guiding the traffic around. If these guys fully block the highway, it only takes a few trucks and you can't move them. Now, to move a semi-trailer takes another semi-trailer, a specialized vehicle that gets under the front of the semi that moves it, right? These things weigh like 25 tons, 30 tons, just a truck. You can't just move that. The cops don't have that sort of infrastructure. And the people who own truck towing trucks are truckies, right? So who in their right mind is going to go and move these guys' trucks on, right? Who is a truck driver? They're their mates. They would know the guys that are pulled up, right? So we could be in for a very interesting day. Now, it could fizzle out and could become nothing, but I don't think so. There's only a few borders. There's a few roads over the border. They do that deliberately so they can monitor the traffic going to and from. And there's only a few roads into the city. Right, you got, I think it's a Princess Highway from down south, Pacific Highway. You got the highway that goes out west, and that's about it. And you've got a few little tiny minor roads that feed in from some of the mountains, like the Putty Road that goes through Windsor. That's it. That's your whole food supply, everything that you need as a population to live in Sydney. You got to remember, this is like a Hunger Games. That is the capital, right? And all these, here I am out in the Hunter in District 13, right? All the resources go down there to the capital. There is nothing that is generated in the city that you need to survive that comes from the city. Nothing. Your food, your water, everything comes from externally and funnels into that city. So we have a just-in-time food delivery service, which means that food arrives just in time. It comes fresh from wherever it is, and it lands in the supermarket, and you take it home. Now, there's
So,
3 to 5 days.
Stuart, leading up to this, I really did feel that this was going to be a flop. I've been to a number of protests over the past few weeks since the large one, and the energy just hasn't been into it. But it has been a city and Western Sydney crowd. This is the first time that we're really seeing some of the regional or outside of the city come into this. We're starting to see something different from your urban people to your country blokes. And we've spoken a few times about the divide between the two. And I said quite a few times on my stream separately that the single biggest divide in this country, it's not really Liberal, Labor, One Nation, political. It's not men, women, gender, high income, low income. There's plenty of rich and poor people where you are and where I am. There's all sorts in both places. The single biggest divide that, as I can see it, is simply population density. If you're in a big high-rise sky tower or in a very dense area, or if you're living in a quarter-acre block outside Singleton, the views that the two people will have and the two areas have are so wildly different. And they could have the same level of education, be born in the same country. You've got plenty of immigrants where you are as well. But simply the outlook is so radically different. Is what I'm saying match when you come to the city? Do you find yourself the views radically different when you come in here?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I used to live down there. I used to live out in Campbelltown. It was actually a few acres out there where I grew up. My family had a few acres, and that's all like housing development now, right? It's sort of Menangle Park, the place used to be called, just south of Campbelltown.
Yep.
That was a beautiful spot. It's all turned into housing development now. And I don't know if it's so much of a divide between the city and the country. It's just that's where most of the politicians live, right? When you break down your areas into 150,000 people, 120,000 people, I think it is a seat. Most of those seats are in the city. So naturally, it just siphons all the money from the country areas. It's not that we hate people that live in the city. It's just that we don't like seeing all of the money go down there. Sure, it probably makes sense because that's where the population density is, but we end up with nothing. Right? You
And
go
this is
around.
a chance, the first chance I've seen in a while for a protest from the country to occur. I can't think of a country protest outside some wheat board and odd little things like that. This is the first time I've seen it like that. And I really am still expecting it to be a flop. But do you think they're going to turn out?
Yeah, I think they might, because you got to remember, you might need 10,000 people at a protest in the city, to make some sort of a dent. Right? You probably need 300 truck drivers to shut down the whole state. Right? You can't, what's that cop going to do? Yeah, he can get in if he can get into the truck, and a lot of those trucks have kill switches. Right? You can't just get into a truck, one of those trucks, and steal the truck, because the truck's worth probably like $300,000. You can't just take it. It's got kills. Those guys are too smart for that. And imagine if that's just one truck. What about the truck behind it, and the one behind that, and the one behind? Especially if they jackknife them, they park them and jackknife them. You're never going to be able to move them. You only need 10 of those at each sort of border crossing and road, and that's it. You're stuck for days and days and days. So,
And it said something that we saw politicians start to jump onto this, in that Pauline Hanson was seen right at the front line and, in fact, asked the truckies to move on today. So you could be right about something, that if she's willing to get out there and break it down, there's something to this, isn't there?
yeah, well, why she wanted, I didn't have to listen to why she wanted the protest broken down, but it could be because there was some emergency services and animals and whatever on the road, like I was told, which is fair enough. But tomorrow, I would say that everyone's had full warning for weeks that this was going to go on. Now, I support peaceful protesting. I don't necessarily support tens of thousands of people marching through the street in the middle of the pandemic, right? But I didn't support it either when it was Black Lives Matter protests. I don't think that it's a good idea. It'll could exacerbate the problem. But this is very different thing. This is a very different thing, because these guys are not gathering in large groups, moving with other large groups that could potentially spread this virus, even though there's no proof that it can be spread outdoors whatsoever. It seems to be an indoor, close proximity thing. But I do support this one, because they are going to force these guys. This is their livelihoods. They're going to force them to get this vaccination to cross the border. Now, this is, where are our rights? This is what these guys are asking. Where are our individual rights? Where do we stand on this? There is no laws on this, because it's written the way the Constitution is written. If something is not written into the Constitution, the government is not afforded that right. And that's why ScoMo has been so limp on all these issues, is because he has no jurisdiction to do anything. He has no constitutional right to do anything. Our Constitution is very different. That it allows the politician, it's a rule book for the politicians. It's not a rule book for the people. It's a rule book for the politicians. And he has no ability to do anything. This is why he's farming everything out to the states.
Mate, you know what it's like out there and how these lockdowns have affected most people in the country. Is it, like, what's the vibe? What's the feeling? Are you meeting people who've been stood down from work, that are angry, they're upset, or is it just a shrug and get on with it kind of attitude?
Not so much where we are. I mean, where we are is largely coal mining. Coal mines have been largely unaffected. We've got all the controls and stuff in place, but a huge percentage of the workers from Manta work in the coal mining associated industries. So it's deemed essential work. It's necessary. You can't just close down these mines, because you got to understand there are massive trade implications. What you're dealing with is other people's electricity supply. You stop shipping that coal. It's been purchased on a futures contract. It must be delivered. The company must deliver it. It's almost like it could be treated as an act of war if you're going to not supply these countries with electricity. It's their electricity supply. So a lot of it goes to China. Majority of it goes to Japan, South Korea. There's some of those Southeast Asian countries. So yeah,
But you're saying these truckie strike could affect coal exports,
no. What I'm saying is
but the lockdowns could. Yes.
we
Got it. Yeah.
out here anywhere near as bad,
Yeah.
and it doesn't matter how bad the lockdowns get. I don't think
Yeah.
that they will shut down mining because it has ongoing implications far beyond just what the immediate lockdown would. You know, what
Yeah.
would
If we lock down Sydney, all the bankers work from home. It's the baristas, it's the retail that gets cut off at
yeah.
the knees. But
Well,
who
all,
really cares about
all
that, right? So what?
all, they're all copped it as well. All the coffee shops and the retail shops and all that. I'm not saying that there's been no effect up here at all. What I'm saying is, proportionately compared to Sydney, we haven't been affected in the same proportion, especially in a town like Singleton. A lot of our retail and everything has moved east to Newcastle, Maitland, and those sort of areas. Those guys would be doing it a lot tougher than what we are out here, for sure. For sure.
And you've got one big customer that gets disrupted. If Matsushita Steel of Tokyo gets defaults on $1 billion worth of a steel futures contract because we lock down a coal miner that doesn't get coking coal to Yokohama, yep, okay, that's a much bigger deal than Jenny from Vaucluse can't get a hair done or can't get a coffee. You've got 1,000 disparate versus one very angry CEO. Coming back to the truckie strike tomorrow, you think this is something that could really impact things? You think there's going to be a turnout? We're going to see a road blockade? The Queensland truckie strike was moved on within about 90 minutes or a couple of hours there. You think it's going to last longer than that?
That was two trucks. And look at what it did. The entire country's news organizations zoomed in and focused on this truckie blockade. So imagine if that happens and it goes on for days, which is potentially, because this is what they had planned. Now, whether they pull it off or not, I don't know. But the potential is there. The potential to pull this place up is there. And like I said, I support their right to protest, to do this. Yes, it's
Tell us about being able to pull this off. Tell us about this image here. This is the layout graphic that we were speaking about earlier.
Yeah, so this has been shared around a bit. So there's graphics like this getting out. Now, this could have been created by anybody, but this is just potentially, the idea, I guess, of what could be possible is obviously a highway going up the guts there, and then bang, the blockade goes in, and there's nowhere to go. You can't get around it. It's bush on either side. So that's the major highway going from, Sydney to Newcastle, and that is the only road. That is the only way to get up there. So, look, I don't know what your thoughts are on it, Chris, but as I said, I support the guys. I support their right to do it. And these are probably, when you think about it, these guys and maybe the wharfies are probably the only two group of people that could get the Premier to listen, and the cops. If the cops walked off the job and just refused to do what they're doing anymore, then that would, obviously they couldn't implement anything they were doing at all. But aside from that, stopping the flow of goods and services, you think the toilet paper's been a problem. Imagine if everything is like toilet paper. Everything. You can't get anything. And once people realise if this goes on for longer than a day and more truckies start to join in and this goes on for a couple of days, you think you've seen panic buying. The panic buying that would come from this would be something like no one had ever seen before. you know.
Mm.
So it has the potential to be massive. Now, whether they pull it off, I don't know.
We were speaking about the effect of the lockdowns and the unions, and I wanted to bring up something I saw today which I haven't seen before. Let me give that a full screen here. You ever heard of the lockdown to zero movement?
Oh, no.
This is coming out of I discovered it through I keep an eye on the Socialist Alliance, but also the maritime workers, one of the unions. This is a movement to that says it's for working classes, as Socialist Alliance does, to bring a proper lockdown to bring community transmission to zero, for mass mandatory vaccination programs, for essential work to be safer, and an increase in health funding. What do you think about the idea of a lockdown to zero from the 1,000 cases we're at the moment?
Mate, the time to do that has long passed. They maybe could have pulled that off if they did a Dan Andrews style lockdown from the very beginning rather than gradually getting to Dan Andrews. If if they did that in the first couple of weeks, they probably could have pulled it off. But then again, even Dan hasn't pulled it off this time. And he had a couple of cases when he started, and now, they're at 100 or so a day. So I'm not sure. I think this is this insane thing coming from insane people that make their money off other people's hard work. Right? That's what you got to remember. That a union is a small group of people that are living out of other people's pockets, and they don't. Most of them are socialists that run these unions. They do not necessarily believe in the entire free market process of things. They think that their workers are being exploited because their labor is being used to generate profits, and the worker's only paid a wage. He's not given a cut in the profits. And it's a very, like, this is the trade union movement. It's got a communist background. That's where it comes out of. It's still got that commie sort of roots about it. And that's what this thing is. You have a look at it. All the teachers are still getting paid. All the government workers are still working. They're all still getting paid. Doesn't matter if they're at home or not. So this is destruction of free enterprise. That's what that spells the end of.
It
Individual.
it it's made me sit back and go, okay, who's playing who to get where? Because lockdown to zero and the Socialist Alliance, and I would say the left wing of the Labour Party and most of the Greens are saying that these lockdowns are crushing the working classes, are crushing working people. Up until now, I've broadly seen that many of the work from home set have no problem with lockdowns. I mean, and that includes me. Lockdowns mean quieter streets and more pleasant living conditions for me. So go ahead, lockdown forever. But there is kind of an impact on everything else societally. We're kind of got some small costs to this. We're quieter roads, as pleasant as they are and nice it is to not go into the office, it has costs on everything else. So I'm trying to work through, is this some kind of, I've had some people say that this is an astroturf campaign on one part. Do you think lockdowns are disproportionately affecting, as Socialist Alliance say, working classes, or is it disproportionately affecting billionaires and work from home types?
You've only got to have a look at anybody who owns anything is getting rich right now. Anybody who owns stocks, shares, they're one in the same thing. Sorry, bonds, real estate. It doesn't matter. Cars, boats. When was the last time that you could buy a sports car 2 or 3 years ago and sell it for the same amount of money that you can today? I mean, you have a look. I've got my Ford Ranger parked out there. I purchased it probably 4 or 5 years ago, and I could sell it for the same money today that I purchased it for. This is just unheard of. Absolutely unheard of. Now, everything in our lives, real estate's gone up 25% since the beginning of COVID. Like, this is insane. So if you have things and you're still working, you are profiting enormously from what's
Mm.
going on at the moment. Absolutely enormously.
I'm going to pull a couple of comments up here. Eric has mentioned that he's heard a Sydney fruit market will be terminating anyone who participates in this strikes. I wouldn't be surprised given where we're at with different employment reactions. Um, Similar to what you'd expect most employees to do. Do you think there will be backlash on people who participate in this protest?
Oh, I don't know how there would be. I mean, how are they going to backlash? These guys, they own their own trucks. They are, you know, they are their own workers. They are their own people. So these trucks are worth $500,000 and $600,000, and they're being prevented from crossing the border and earning any money
Mm.
to pay off their trucks. So, I mean, what are you not going to buy a fruit that's dropped off by one of these trucks? I mean, you have no idea. Everything in your life is dropped off by a truck.
Mm.
Absolutely everything. So I don't know. There may be some backlash. There may be some people that say, well, we're not going to buy goods and services that are dropped off by one of these trucks, but I can't see it. I can't see it
If this
happening.
manages to work, if the country is able to send a message with this, it could be a beginning of a little bit of an awakening of the power of regional distributors to be able to work. On the other side, farms are more corporatized than ever. And sure, there may be employees that work for the Cargills and the large distributors, but it's a knife edge. I'm still expecting this to be a flop, but I am searching for what will get country New South Wales and country Australia realizing its position, because for a long time I've seen them just kind of accept broadly the nationals just accept just and say, oh, this is fine, and not really accept any radical change, a real shake up of what will get country New South Wales into this fight to recognize their position and their power.
Well, a lot of the problem is the people in country New South Wales, there's no cases in a lot of these places. There's absolutely no cases. So these people are being locked down. Some of their businesses are being destroyed. And for what? For zero cases in the area. I mean, was a Sydney-born problem. It should have stayed in Sydney. Gladys didn't sort her stuff out fast enough, and now everybody in the whole state is paying the consequences. Now,
Mm.
oh, sorry, I've got a kid running loose.
No, please, it's wonderful.
Yeah, yeah, little bundle of joy. Yeah, so sorry, I lost track of the
It's
question.
okay. You were just saying that it's a Sydney problem,
It
and it should have stayed to be a Sydney problem.
was a Sydney problem, and now it's gone. It's gone basically over the whole state. But there's a lot of areas. This is a huge state. I think it's something like 8 million square kilometres or something ridiculous. The whole state. We've got the whole thing locked down. The whole thing. You know, you got to remember a lot of these truck drivers. They come out of the city as well.
Mm.
It's not just people living out here that are driving from Cessnock or Cobar or from down south into Queanbeyan or whatever into Sydney. This is a lot of Sydney drivers that are driving out of Sydney and then coming back. So there's a lot of pissed off truck drivers that live in Fairfield and everything at the moment that can't even get out of their own LGA, right? That are driving trucks. So you got to
I hadn't
think
thought
it's not
about that. Yeah.
up here that are pissed off. What happens when the truckie leaves and goes to drive north to Brisbane and decides, I'm going to join the blockade?
Yeah, he does. Yeah,
Oh.
beautiful. Mate, thank you for that insight. I'm going to head into Parliament House tomorrow morning. I'm not expecting too much to be happening there, but I'll stream for a bit. Some of the flyers say that it's going to be every Parliament area, but if anything, the city will have some kind of Transport Management Command response.
Where have all the police come from? This is another thing I want to know. Like, you can call the cops. I remember once I rang the police when a woman was getting beat up out the front of her house. I rang the cops. It took them an hour and a half for them to get there. An hour and a half. And yet I watch some of these videos and the cops will make a phone. I'll get on the radar, on the radio. There'll be 30 cops there within minutes. And I'm just thinking, where have all these cops come from? You know, because it just seems that we've been overwhelmed by a police presence, and they all seem to be very well tactically kit out. You know, they've got all the tactical gear on, and they look military. Don't look like cops. So,
compared to Melbourne, where we've got jumpsuits here. In Melbourne, they're kitted out there's hundreds kitted out in hard gear, which is confronting to look at. The main reason on the gear I was actually bring up is that it makes it very difficult to communicate. When you've got the mask and the hard visor and the shield, you cannot communicate with an officer. Anyone in Melbourne, you're not going to be able to say to that officer what you're thinking or feeling, and they're not going to be able to hear it. So this cone of silence comes down between you, where all they're seeing is your actions and filled with fear.
And they've got every part of their body's got black, hard plastic pieces of carbon fiber or whatever.
Yep.
Yeah, and it looks crazy. I do wonder. I mean, this would have all been put in the wake of that cafe shooting, I guess, or the hold up down there.
Yep.
In the wake of 9/11, whatever, where you think that they're putting laws in for one thing, and then years later you realise, oh, this surveillance was for us. This surveillance wasn't for terrorists, the 12 terrorists that are in the country. So, yeah.
What's been brought up here is also the response, because after the Lindt siege, it wasn't so much that the attack happened, it was how we then respond to it. And you're exactly describing what happened after 9/11 was a big response here. I don't, like most firmed responses, in some situations in Eastern Europe, you'll see that these kind of truckie protests can have an effect and a response from farmers. I don't see enough city-country empathy to really see if shelves go bare. I can foresee a lot of blame coming out of your ABC, Newtown, corporate media types who live in Double Bay and just can't explain why their shelves are empty. They'll sit up and just do editorials all night long about why you're to blame and you're being selfish. How do you think the truckies will see some empathy from the city, or do you think they're just going to be called disruptors, protesters, and bloody bastards?
Oh, I think that they'll be called every name under the sun if they had the desired effect that they want, that the shelves actually do go there. People will be absolutely furious. But again, they have the right to protest. You have the right to protest in a free country. And I believe that we're still living in a free country, and we need to fight every day to make sure that it remains free. Yeah, at the moment, we're living under some sort of strange medical dictatorship where you can go from your house to your workplace and home all masked up. Some guys were saying the other day from work that they carpooled and one of them was asleep, had his mask down around under his neck. The other guy didn't have a mask on that was driving. Pulled over, cop banged on the window, wake up, mate. Where he's from? Do you live in the same household? No. Why have you got your mask on? Hey, $500 fine each. No mask. Just sharing a vehicle. Now, this is just crazy town. It's just crazy.
Yeah.
You know,
it's
there's 700,000 people that live in the Newcastle sort of area. We got 6 cases of COVID. 6 or something in the last 24 hours. Right? This is nuts. Disproportionate. And they're getting people off site.
That's really hard to take city rules and apply them to the country. A lot of the city rules are for dense, built-up urban areas where police have really hard time trying to work out who's following the rules and not. And if you're out the front of a 70-story skyscraper a 30-story skyscraper in an LGA of concern, if you see someone not wearing a mask, that makes it easier for a police officer to work out, right, guy could be a problem. Let's go and have a chat with him. If you're on a quarter-acre block outside Maitland,
Yeah.
this is not as much of a concern, and that's where city rules apply to country. It's difficult. We're better than Victoria. I don't know if you've seen those rules down there, but it's still, again, another city-country divide. Mate, we've had your time for 35 minutes, which I'm very grateful for. Last words before you sign off for tomorrow's predictions.
Is guys, excuse me. there's going to be a lot of debate going forward about what's going on here. This is going to happen for decades. They're going to look back on. But what people need to remember is that once you give up your freedom, it's gone. It doesn't come back. So the ramifications of what we do now and what we lose now are going to be felt forever. Your children, your children's children are never going to live as free as what you are right now. And what you do over the coming months and who you vote for and what you do moving forward is going to dictate the type of country that your children are going to live in. So have a little bit of sympathy for some of these people that are fighting for their rights, because you can't turn around in years to come and go, oh, we shouldn't have done that. That it's too late at that point. So you need to look and try and understand what is happening from other people's perspective, because you're not living in their shoes. They are dealing with different circumstances to you are. So, guys, peace out, and we might talk tomorrow and see the repercussions of this, Chris.
Thanks for you, Stu. Good to see you, mate.
See you, mate.
See you, mate. Thanks for watching, everyone.